Today's class is dedicated by Yehuda. Thank you, Yehuda Karenblum, for dedicating today's lesson and so many other lessons so we can have this course. Where did Yehuda go? He was just here. Oh, he's here. Yehuda's there. Okay, great.
Right here.
Awesome. All right, getting into today's Chumash. I actually want to show you a little bit of a map, okay? So here's the check. I'm going to spend a few minutes on the family tree because it'll really give us like understanding in what's going on. This is a Chumash, actually. Ira Stein asked me about it. This is a great Chumash published by Kahas, which had the story where Moses went between Egypt and Midian. He went to Ethiopia, to Cush. And we also have some maps and stuff there. So I actually took a look here, and they had this family tree, which I'm going to share with you now. It's on the Chabad.org website, or you could order the books. But here is the family tree. So you got to, a lot of times to understand the stories, you got to know the family tree. So we're going to spend a few minutes now going over the family tree, which will give us clarity in today's Chumash and in the future Chumash. So those who are able to look at the screen, go for it. And get some clarity into the stories here. So let's do this together. One of the reasons Rashi tells us we're doing the family tree now is because who are these guys? So you show up and you want to free the Jews? I mean, why should we even trust you? Like, you know, so it makes, if a guy shows up, you don't know who his father is, you don't know who his mother is, you don't know who his grandparents are, then maybe there's reason not to believe the person. Then you start questioning. But if, let's say, a guy comes, his father was a chief rabbi, and his grandfather was a chief rabbi, and his mother was this, and you know that they come from somewhere, then, of course, your confidence in them grows. So it makes a really big difference, and therefore, we're going to talk about this for a few minutes in understanding the story specifically of Moshe's family, where this is the origination of the Kohanim and the Levim. So here we go. On top of our family tree, there's a man called Jacob. I'm actually going to even use a highlighter here to show you, a spotlighter to show you what we're talking about. So there's a man called Yaakov. Yaakov is the third of the forefathers, as all of you know. We want to get to Levi. However, Levi had two older brothers. The main character we want to get to is Levi. We want to talk about his family tree specifically. But to get to Levi, you got to go through his two older brothers. His oldest brother, Yaakov's first son, his name was Reuven. Reuven had 5 children. So Reuven had 5 sons. The next brother was Shimon. Shimon also had 5 children. Yamin, Ohad, Yachin, Sorah, and Shol. So, and then we have Levi. Now, also to mention, if anybody remembers from the last Torah portion, in the end of the first book, we're holding now the second Torah portion in the second book. But the last Torah portion in the end of the first book, if you remember, Yaakov did not bless 3 children. It seems like he gave them like, over the head for the way they behaved. And they were these 3 children. It's also going to help us understand a little bit of today's class. So Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, those 3, instead of getting just a blessing, they also got admonished by their father for the way they behaved. But anyway, moving on. And we'll reference that later in the class. Levi has 3 sons, 3 famous sons. Their sons are Gershon, Kahas, and Merari. Those are the names. You see the family tree here, Gershon, Kahat, and Merari. Those are very significant to the history of the Jewish people, because when it comes time to go in the desert, and they're going to need to carry the tabernacle with them, they're going to need to carry all the furniture, they're going to need to carry all the curtains, they're going to need to carry all the beams. Who is going to be the one carrying it? It's going to be these 3 families, and they're going to split up the work between the 3 families, who's responsible for what. So Levi's 3 sons are going to have a very special job coming up. No one else is going to be allowed to carry it. Only the children of Levi. Levi is going to live around the temple, around the Mishkan in that area, and they're going to always dismantle and put together and carry. They're going to oversee the shul, the main synagogue that is going to lead the Jewish people. All right, so just stay with me because it's important to go through this family tree to understand history. Now we're going to go to the middle son. Okay, so Levi has 3 sons: 1 Gershon, Kahas; 2 Merari; 3. He also had a daughter. If you follow the line, you'll see it to the right side. It goes to the right and goes down. And her name is Yocheved. Yocheved. So he has 3 sons and 1 daughter, Gershon, Kat, Merari, and Yocheved. Now, one of his sons, Kahas, has a number of children. He's going to be the main child, which we're going to discuss. He has a child called Amram, he has a child. If you're looking, I'm pointing with my spotlight here. Yitzhar, Chevron, and Uziel, right? My baby's name is Uziel. He's named after one of the four sons of Kahat. So the Levi, through his son Kahat, has four grandchildren. He has more from his other two sons, but he has four famous grandchildren through Kahat. So Kahat has four children. Now, Aaron does something very interesting. He marries his aunt. Okay? It's important to know the story. Amram marries his father's sister. So again, Levi had three sons and one daughter. One of his sons marries his daughter, and it's Amram marrying Yocheved. So it's a nephew marrying an aunt, which is not allowed today. You're not allowed to do that, though before the Torah was given, it's allowed. The commentaries addressed how this was done. Amram and Yocheved together have three children. They have two sons and one daughter. Who are those two sons? They're going to become very famous sons, very relevant to our story. Aaron and Moses are the children of Amram and Yocheved. So Amram, Levi's grandson, marries Levi's daughter. Okay? Levi is one of Yaakov's 12 sons. He's a third son of Yaakov. The third son of Yaakov has a son and a daughter, and his son's son marries his daughter. And they have someone called Aaron and Moshe are the two sons born from the marriage of the nephew and the aunt, and that's how Moses and Aaron come into the story. I'm going to just point out that Aaron's sons, let's talk about for a minute, are Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Isamar. They're going to become Kohanim. Those four sons will become Kohanim. Now, Amram, Moses' father, had a brother. Look at the map here. His brother was Yitzhar. Okay? Amram had a brother called Yitzhar. Yitzhar had a son called Korach, which means that Amram and Yitzhar, who were two brothers, had two sons. One of them had a Moses. The other one had Korach, which means that Korach and Moses are cousins. Later on in the desert, there's going to be a big fight. Korach is going to get very upset at Moses. And if you understand the family tree, you'll see why it all makes sense. It's all based on this family tree here and understanding how a lot of this goes down. So again, there's Jacob. Jacob has a son called Levi, has two older sons, Reuben and Shimon. Levi has three sons and a daughter. One of his sons has another son called Amram who marries his aunt. And they have a child called Moses and Aaron, at least for today's class. And this is where they come from. So as the Chumash that we're looking at here actually wants to say, is that the significance is very important. Why? Why is it so important? Because we need to know who Moses and Aaron come from. We need to know the stock of where Moses and Aaron come from, these people that are coming to free the Jewish people. Any questions or comments? I hope that was pretty clear. The family tree helps organize it and show what it is. Everybody good? Everybody good with me? You understand what's going on? All right, let's get started with the Chumash. So, Eile Rashi Beis Avoisam. These are the heads of the father's houses. So in Egypt, we know that the Jews became a tremendous amount of people. And we know Jacob came down with 70 heads. He came down with his 12 sons. And the sons had sons. And that's where the future and the tribes of the Jewish people will be created. Who were the oldest sons? So he goes through quickly the oldest sons because he wants to get to the third son. So he's going to first go through the first and second son just to tell you who they were. The oldest one was Ruvain. He was Bechar Yisrael. He was the firstborn of Yaakov, of Yisrael. And he had a couple of children. I think we said 5. Chanoch, Falu, Chetzur, and Carmi. 4 children. That is the children of Ruvain. So Rashi addresses right away. We want to get what's going on. Why are you giving me the family tree here, right? I mentioned the answer already to this question. Rashi says, why are you giving me the family tree? What do I care about it? So he says, the goal here is to tell you who's Moses and Aaron. Where do they come from? They're just born in a black hole, in a void? Or we know who their family is? And the answer is, we definitely do know who they are. They come from very prestigious people. He's a grandson, a great-grandson of Levi, of Levi. And his mother is a daughter of Levi. He comes from royalty, from dignity, and this is where Moses is born. He's born into this very special family, and he continues the tradition of the family. He says another interesting thing, which I mentioned before, that when Yaakov died, he gave everybody blessings. Besides the oldest 3 sons, he admonished them. So you might think that this family was kind of excommunicated, like it was, this family did not keep together with the Jewish people. So he's getting you back to here and saying, no. Even though the father at his passing, Yaakov at his passing, told the children how he was not happy with some of the things they acted, they're part of the Jewish people, The families were counted as the rest of the Jewish people. Don't think that they were cut off from the rest of the Jewish people. So then we have the second son in the next verse. His name is Shimon. Shimon, he had Yemuel, V'yamin, V'ohad, V'yachim, and Zohar. He had 5 sons, V'Shaul, Ben Aknanis, and also there was someone called Shaul, who was a daughter of the Canaanite. Rashi spoke about that the last time when we mentioned this, is that Shimon ended up marrying his sister Dinah, because Dinah would not leave Shechem after she was convinced to marry the guy Shechem. She was raped by Shechem. She ended up marrying Shimon, and then they had a child together with his sister, whose name was Shaul. And these are the families of the tribe of Shimon. And finally, we're getting to the family tree that we want to specifically focus on today. The Elishmos B'nai Levi, and these are the sons of Levi. And as I just showed you in the tree, there was 3 sons. Levi had 3 famous sons: Gershon, Kahas, and Merari. And now he tells you how long Levi lived. He doesn't tell you anybody else in the family tree. One other person you'll see is going to tell you how long he lived. And Rashi is going to tell us why. But let's first see how long Levi lived. Ushnei Chaye Levi. Levi lived for Sheva Ushleishim Umayas Shana. Levi lived for 137 years. Rashi says, why are you telling me this guy how long he lived? You're not telling me almost anybody else, him and his son. We're going to tell you Levi's son, Amram, how long Amram lived. Why are you telling me these 2 people's sons when you're not telling me anyone else's son? So Rashi has a very interesting answer. Rashi says, because if you take their age, we know who was the one to pass away the last out of the 12 tribes. Who was the one to pass away the last? The last one of all the 12 tribes was not the youngest son, but was the 3rd son. Levi actually lived the longest. He passed away the last. Levi lived 137 years. Okay, now, what does that mean to us? And we also know that the slavery, in the real pain in slavery, didn't start until all the 12 tribes passed away. Pharaoh didn't have a change of heart and start torturing the Jews until everyone passed away. So we learned from this that since Levi lived so long, that the slavery didn't start till a much later time. And that is really why we're telling you the age of when Levi passed away, because we want you to know that the slavery didn't start until Levi passed away, and it wasn't until like the last 80 years, or 113 years actually, that the slavery really got difficult after Levi passed away. B'nai Gershon. Now, Levi had 3 sons, right? We got to get to Moses. So his oldest son was Livni V'Shimi, was 2 sons, Livni and Shimi. Uvnei Kahas, Levi's second son, was Amram, Yitzhar, Chevron, Uziel. So Kahas, Levi's middle son was Kahas. Kahas had 4 children. His oldest of the 4 children was Amram. Shnei Chaye Kahas. When you take his son Kahas's years, you get Shalosh Ushleishim Umyas Shana, you get 133 years. So now he tells you, why am I telling you Kahas's age? I don't know if people are following me with the numbers, but if you're able to write this down, this is what the calculation you would make. I know that Kahas lived 133 years. I know that the other person, that Amram, lived 137 years. So the grandfather was Kahas. His son was Amram, lived 137 years, and Amram's son was Moshe. So if you take the 3 numbers, you add it up at a calculator, 133, 137, and 80, you'll get to 250, or 350, sorry, 133 plus 137 plus 80 is 350. Now, officially, God told Abraham that your children will be slaves in Egypt for 400 years. The problem is that we know that Kahas, the grandfather, was one of the original people that came down to Egypt. We know that his grandson, Moses, was the one who left Egypt at 80 years old. So if you take the age of the grandfather, who was the original people that came down to Egypt, and his son, who lived in Egypt, and the grandson, Moses, and you put them all together, you only get 350. So it can't be that when God originally told Moshe that your son, Abraham, that your children will be slaves in Egypt for 400 years, that's not a real number. It must be that it didn't start from the date they came down. It must have started much earlier, because even if you take the people that came down and his son and his grandson, and you add all them together, and they're the original ones that came, and they're the original ones that left, they're going to be the ones that leave. It doesn't come to 400 years. It only comes to 350. And on top of that, even when you take a father's age and his son's age and his grandson's age and you add them all together, there's also a lot of time where the grandfather and the son and the grandson all lived during each other's lifetimes. So you can't really add the number even. So obviously it had to be significantly less than 400 years that the slavery was there. It's just a proof from the numbers in the Torah itself. These numbers are important because they prove that when God originally told Abraham that your children will be slaves for 400 years was not an actual number. It was going to be much less than that. And the 400 years will start at a different point from when his son Isaac was born. Anyway, continuing right along. Ubnei Merari, and the third son, who was Merari, Levi's third son, was Machli Mushi, had two sons, Machli Mushi, and Levi, and these are the family of the Levites, the Toldais and Ritter children. So now we had so far Jacob's oldest three sons, then we had the son Gahas. We said he had a number of children, and then one of his children was Amram, Vayikach Amram, and here's what the Torah tells us, that Amram, Moses' father, married as Yocheved, Moses' mother, who was Amram's aunt. The Torah tells us straight out that he married his aunt. Yes, Aaron best Moshe, and from that marriage between the nephew and the aunt was born Moses and Aaron. Amram, how long did Moses' father Amram live for? Sheva Ushleishim Yashan, 137 years. So the Torah tells us that Moses' father lived 137 years, and Moses' grandfather lived 133 years. Uvnei Yitzhar. And there was what about Moses' father's brother? So Moses' father's name was Amram. Amram's brother Yitzhar had also two children, Korach, Benef, and Zichri. Those are Moses' cousins from his uncle Yitzhar. He had three cousins, Uziel, and Moses' uncle Uziel had also, Yishol, Beltaf, and Sisri had three sons that we're learning here. So there are other cousins to Moses. Yikach Aaron, and what about Moses and Aaron themselves? Aaron, who did he marry? He married a girl called Elisheva. Bas Aminadav, the daughter of Aminadav. So we know Aaron's wife's name was Elisheva, and he says something very interesting here, an interesting Rashi, a really cool Rashi. He says in the family tree here that Aaron married a girl whose name was Elisheva. It tells you who the girl's father was, and it even tells you who the girl's brother was. So the girl's father was Aminadav, and her brother was Nachshon. That was his name. His name was Nachshon. Why do we care to know that Aaron's wife's brother, why do we care to know? Why is it relevant to Aaron? Why do we care to know who Aaron's brother-in-law was? Why is that important? So Rashi says, he tells you advice. Rashi says, I guess that's what Harvey's trying to say. Why do we tell you who his brother-in-law was? And Rashi says something interesting. He says that when it comes time to get married and you're deciding if you should marry the girl or not, part of the research should be into the girl's brothers. Look at the girl's brothers, see what they're like. Because there's a chance that your children will end up to be like their mother's brothers, like their uncles. So when you go to get married, look into the girls, look into who the girl's brothers are, because it's a high likelihood that your children will learn from them. Uvneka, so that's what he tells you, that Aaron's wife's brother was Nachshon, who was an amazing guy. So Aaron married this woman who came from an amazing family. She had an amazing brother. That's a Lazavi summer. And Aaron and Elisheva have four sons, which will be future Kohanim, Nadav and Avihu, Elazar and Isamar. Korach. And now Moses' cousin Korach, who ends up being a very rich and powerful man, his cousin. And we'll learn about it later on. His children were Asir, Velkana, Vav Yasaf. He had three sons, Elim, Mishpasach, Karchi, and those are the family of Korach, of Moses' cousin Korach. Elazar and Aaron. Now, what about Aaron's? We mentioned four children. Aaron's son Elazar, it tells us who he married. He married a man from Putiel, Loyli Isha, for a wife. Rashi tells us who's this Putiel guy. Putiel, why does sounds like a funny name, Putiel. Why would a guy be called this name, Putiel? So he says, as in the Torah, often the name is referencing a story or something about the person, not just the name of the person. And Putiel could mean stuffed. He was a descendant, also married someone from Moshe, from the same wife. So Moses married a girl from Yisro, you remember, from the city of Midian. This person, Pinchas, this Elazar, married also someone that his uncle Moshe married from the same family, the wife of Moshe's family. And her father, if you remember, used to be an idol worshiper, was a priest to idolatry, and he would stuff calves for idols. He would fatten up the cows. He was so into idolatry at one point that he would fatten up the cows that they would bring to sacrifice them to their idols. That's one reason why the girl he marries is called the daughter of Putiel. Another reason is because not just will the girl he will marry, and we'll learn about this later on in the Torah, be a grandchild, a descendant of Putiel, of Yisro, who was a former priest, but also was a grandchild of Joseph. And by the story of Joseph, he fought with his passions. Remember the story of Joseph, who his master's wife wanted to sleep with him, and Joseph overcame that, and that is recognized in this word Putiel. So the girl that he married was a descendant, a mixture of Joseph and a mixture of the story of Joseph and also Yisro, who was a former priest. I don't know if you're following. I hope people are. Who Aaron, who Moshe. The bottom line is, this is the family tree of Moses and Aaron. That God said, I want you to take the Jews of Egypt. I'll survive them in the tribes, in the groups. I want you to take out legions, whole groups of people, and you are the ones that are going to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. And now we know where they come from. Okay, verse 27. They're going to be the ones to speak to Pharaoh. To take the Jews out from Egypt, who Moshe Aaron, it's the same Moses and Aaron, who never changed. They were always holy, they were always sacred. Those who want to say that Moses or Aaron maybe did something wrong, no. You should know the Torah is testifying about these two sons of these great families. They came from an amazing, prestigious, illustrious family. They always stayed committed and they were good. Even though we see, I guess, maybe different stories, you should know Moses and Aaron always kept the message and the mission that God gave them. And finally, verse 28, and it was the day God speaks to Moses in Egypt, and we're going to learn tomorrow that he's going to send them on their mission to now speak to Pharaoh and finally get the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim. Any questions or comments? I know family tree could sometimes be confusing and questions, but that was today's Chumash, and hopefully we're able to at least glean some of the insight into the stories we're going to talk about. Yes, Ira and Terry.
No, Terry's not here today. So okay. Family tree, so they give you Aaron's sons, but they don't mention anything about Moses' sons.
That is true. It's very interesting. We don't see a lot about Moshe's sons in the Torah. So they're giving, the map is very good. The family tree is very good because it's important that we get the family tree down. I know the other day someone was trying to tell me my family tree, my great aunt married this, and I couldn't follow. You know, you really need like paper and like pen and to like really figure these things out. But the Torah is telling us the relevant parts to the story. Torah is telling us the relevant parts of the story that we're going to need to know, who we're going to mention. All those characters, all the people are characters in the story. They're characters. I mean, they're real people who the Torah tells us about that are in this map. We're not really going to have Moshe's son mentioned in the Torah. Very interesting. The one place we will mention, it's a great question, it's a great point you bring up, we'll mention Moshe's son is that Moses, before he passes away, Rashi will mention, I believe, that Moses will want his son to take over. And God says, no, your son is not the right person for the job. Your student Joshua was committed, always stayed by your tent and learned from you, and he's going to be the one to go in. So we also, by the way, Moses separated from his wife. We even have the story that Moses wasn't fully married for a significant amount of time, right? Tzipporah. So it seems like Moses had a son, but the Torah doesn't mention it. So the Chumash is not bringing in the family tree, that information there.
So what were they, like black sheep? I mean, obviously.
No, it doesn't say. It doesn't talk about them.
You know, you said if your father's Moses, you expect,
Correct. A lot of pressure. If your father's Moses, you got a lot of pressure on you.
Right. So it could go one way or the other. So
no, but you're noticing something interesting, that the Torah really doesn't mention his son. I'm just saying we don't know much about the personal family life of Moses. We know that Aaron and Miriam gossiped about them, that Moses was not living as husband and wife with his wife. That's an interesting fact we know. We know that Moses, Rashi says, prayed that he wanted his son to take him over. So he did have a son. But other than that, we really don't have a lot of information about this children, if he had at all, if Moses had children. Very interesting. You're right. It does. And you notice that because it lists Aaron's children, but it doesn't miss. But by the way, Aaron seems like got married much earlier than Moshe. Because, first of all, what am I saying? Of course we know Moses' sons. I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm talking about. Moses had two sons, Gershon and Eliezer. We do know who his sons. What am I saying? When Moses goes to Midian, he marries Yisro's daughter, and he has and he has 2 children. Now, I believe that you're asking an interesting question here. So, first of all, Moses has them much later on in life. He has them at 80 years old. According to the story, around 80 years old is when Moshe has those 2 children. Now, I think if I'm not incorrect, Moses' wife and children, something is in my head like this, I don't want to say this for sure, but they did not actually go to Egypt. They didn't get stuck in the slavery. He kind of sent them back home to stay with his father-in-law, with her parents, because later on when Yisro goes to meet them, I believe he comes with Moses' wife and grandchildren and children to meet the Jewish people. So they might not have even experienced, the 10 plagues and the splitting of the sea. They might not have been there for that.
But you're saying it's like the family tree and Moses' kids.
It should have said Moses' children there, but the Torah, he's giving you what the Torah doesn't count it in the family tree. He's just telling you what the Torah says. He's not making it up. He's quoting whatever I just read to you in the verses. Interesting, you're noticing that it doesn't count. It doesn't count those sons that are there. Why not? I don't know. It's a good question. It's a good point. I'm not sure why. It's pretty clear that it's a good point. Excellent point. Anybody else? Any questions or comments before we go on to today's Tanya? Okay, so let us continue.